The wind cut across the frozen plains like a blade, slicing through the stillness of the Montana frontier. Snow drifted in thick, whispering veils over the land, covering every fence post, every footprint, every trace of life. In the distance, a small cabin stood alone, smoke rising thinly from its chimney, a fragile sign of warmth in an otherwise unforgiving world. Inside that cabin lived Clara McConnell, a young widow who had learned to survive the hard way. Her husband had died 2 winters ago, and since then, she'd tended the farm and livestock on her own. The neighbors said she was tough as iron, but inside, she carried a quiet loneliness that no one saw. That night, as the fire burned low and the snow howled outside, Clara heard something, a faint knock on the door. At first, she thought it was the wind, but then it came again. Knock, knock. She hesitated, shotgun in hand, moving closer. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice steady but her heart thudding. No answer, only the hiss of the storm. She opened the door a crack, and what she saw made her gasp. A Sioux boy, no older than 12, stood there shivering. His hair was crusted with snow, his clothes torn, his hands blue from the cold. He could barely stand. Clara dropped the gun instantly and pulled him inside. "Dear Lord, you'll freeze to death out there," she murmured, dragging him toward the fire. He didn't speak English well, just fragments. But the fear and exhaustion in his eyes said everything. She gave him blankets, hot soup, and the warmth of her fire. For hours, she tended to him like her own child. When he finally spoke, it was in broken words. "They chase me, soldiers." Clara froze. She knew what that meant. A boy running from the army's patrols, maybe separated from his tribe. It was dangerous to shelter him. If anyone found out, she could lose her land, or her life. But as she looked at him, trembling by the fire, she made her choice. "You're safe here," she whispered. Over the next few days, she helped him recover. He said his name was Tahu, which meant strong wind. He had been caught near a settler's camp and fled into the storm. Clara hid him in the barn during the day, brought him food at night, and taught him a few English words, enough to understand kindness. Outside, the snowstorm raged on for days, trapping them together. For the first time since her husband's death, Clara felt something stir in her heart. Not romance, but purpose. She saw in Tahu the same fight she once had, the will to live, even when the world turned cruel. One night, while repairing a blanket, she said softly, "You'll go home when the thaw comes, won't you?" Tahu nodded slowly. "Home? Yes, you good woman." The words were simple, but they warmed her more than the fire ever could. Weeks passed. The snow began to melt. One morning, Clara saddled her horse and rode with Tahu toward the river, the edge of the land where the Sioux sometimes passed in spring. When they reached the ridge, she stopped. "This is as far as I go," she said. "From here you find your people." Tahu looked at her for a long moment, his eyes full of emotion he couldn't express. Then, hesitantly, he pulled from his neck a small leather string with a carved bone pendant, a hawk's feather etched into it. He placed it in her hand. "Keep, for remember," he said. She smiled faintly. "I'll remember." Then he turned and disappeared into the golden morning mist. Years passed. The world changed. Railroads came, towns grew, and fences carved the wild lands into squares. Clara's farm stood strong through droughts and storms, but she grew older, her hands rough, her heart a little heavier each year. She still kept the carved feather in a small wooden box beside her bed, the only proof that kindness could outlive a season. Then, one night, nearly 10 years later, the past returned. The wind was fierce again, just like that night long ago. Clara sat by the window, oil lamp flickering, when she heard a distant sound, horses. At first she thought it was travelers, but then came the gunshots. She ran to the door and saw torches in the distance, a band of outlaws riding toward her farm. They'd been raiding nearby homesteads for weeks, and now they were here. She rushed to bolt the door, heart pounding. The farm was too far from town, no one would come. But just as she reached for her rifle, she heard another sound, a sharp cry. followed by the thunder of hooves cutting across the field. From the darkness, figures emerged, riders, swift and silent, their feathers glinting under the moonlight. At the front was a tall man with long black hair and a carved bone pendant at his neck, shaped like a hawk's feather. The moment Clara saw it, her breath caught. He had come back. The night roared alive with gunfire and thunder. The outlaws had come for blood and gold. They'd heard the McConnell farm kept a stash of grain and coin from the harvest, but they didn't expect anyone waiting for them in the dark. Clara stood frozen at her window as shadows galloped across her land. The raiders fired shots into the air, shouting curses, their torches waving like serpents in the night wind. She clutched her rifle, ready to defend her home, when she saw them, riders emerging from the tree line, fast and silent, their horses pounding through the mud like a rolling storm. At their head was a tall figure, Tahu, no longer the frail boy she'd once rescued, but a hardened man, his hair braided with feathers, his face marked with the paint of his people. The carved bone feather she once held was now tied proudly at his neck, glowing faintly in the firelight. The outlaws didn't know what hit them. Arrows whistled through the air. One struck a torch, snuffing it out in a burst of sparks. Another hit a rider's arm, sending him tumbling from his saddle. Within seconds, panic erupted. Clara ran outside, her lantern trembling in her hand. "Tahu!" she cried. He turned, his eyes locking with hers through the smoke and chaos. "Stay inside!" he shouted. "We protect." His voice was firm, commanding. The boy she'd saved was now a warrior who needed no saving. The Sioux riders circled the outlaws, cutting them off from the road. One by one, the raiders fled or fell. The leader, a grizzled man with a scar across his cheek, dismounted, firing wildly toward the house. A bullet tore through the fence beside Clara, splintering wood inches from her arm. She ducked behind a barrel, heart hammering. Tahu dismounted, sprinting across the yard with his spear raised. The outlaw fired again. The shot grazed Tahu's shoulder, but he didn't stop. He lunged, knocking the gun from the man's hand and driving him back into the mud. They struggled, fists flying, until Tahu pinned him down. The outlaw's eyes widened as he realized who he was. Fighting, not a farmer's helper, but a Sioux warrior defending his kin. "Leave," Tahu growled. "Never come back to this land." The man spat, his pride stinging more than his wounds. "You think you own it, savage?" Tahu's jaw tightened. "No," he said quietly, "but she does." He stood and let the man crawl away into the night, beaten and humiliated. When the last of the raiders were gone, silence fell over the prairie, broken only by the soft whinny of horses and the crackle of burning torches dying in the dirt. Clara stepped forward slowly, her lantern light falling across Tahu's face. "You came back," she said softly. He nodded, his voice calm and deep. "You helped me when the cold would have taken my life. I swore I would return if ever you needed me." Clara's eyes glistened. "All these years. I didn't think you'd remember." Tahu smiled faintly. "A promise to the good is never forgotten." He walked beside her to the farmhouse, where the first hints of dawn began to color the horizon. Inside, she bandaged the wound on his shoulder as he sat quietly, the firelight flickering across his calm expression. "You've changed," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You're not the boy I knew." "I am still him," he replied, "but stronger now. The world made me so." They shared a quiet moment, two souls bound by an old act of kindness that time could not erase. As morning broke, Clara looked out the window. Her farm, though scarred by the night's fight, still stood. The fences could be mended, the fields replanted. She turned back to Tahu. "You saved this place." He looked toward the horizon, where his riders waited. "It was you who saved me first. I only returned what was given." Before leaving, he handed her a new pendant, another carved feather, this one inlaid with turquoise and bone. "This means protection," he said. "Keep it close. The wind will always carry my name to you." Clara took it with trembling hands. "And if the wind brings your name again," she said softly, "you'll find this door open." Tahu smiled, mounted his horse, and with a single motion of his hand signaled his warriors. They rode into the rising sun, their silhouettes cutting through the golden light like ghosts of the plains. Clara stood there until they disappeared, the pendant warm in her palm. For the first time in years, she felt safe, not because her land was defended, but because she was remembered. That day, she rebuilt the broken fence with steady hands and a heart full of peace. On the mantel above her fireplace, beside her husband's old photograph, she placed the feather, a symbol not just of survival, but of faith in the good that comes back, even after years apart. And as the sun set that evening, painting the sky in crimson and gold, her voice carried softly in the breeze, a whisper for those who still believed in second chances. Sometimes kindness is the seed that grows long after the storm has passed. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe, because every week we bring you more tales of courage, loyalty, and the unbreakable human spirit.